we're taking up education as the topic for our conversation. Now, when I was talking to Nakul here before, we realized that how education is a very important aspect of all of our lives, and we need to understand how education shapes our everyday lifestyles and how we think and how we react and how we feel of ourselves as human beings is because of it. So that is where I feel we should be devoting this entire conversation or dialogue today on that, because there are certain misconceptions, there are certain challenges, there are certain wrongful interpretations of what we probably think education could have been. So I think this I'm looking forward to this fruitful discussion. Starting with again, I want to get your macro perspective about education and how it shapes us as human beings.
So, Chirag, whatever we do in life as human beings, right, is owing to whatever we know and are capable of doing, right? Yes, this capability and this knowledge comes into the mind, but what really enables us to evolve and function in the world is the knowledge which has been transferred from our ancestors and from the peers around us to us. Now, if you look at any other animal species, they rediscover all the knowledge themselves and hence live the same primitive life which their ancestors were living as well. But human beings live a continuously evolving life by all means, right? And this is solely because of our capability of transferring the knowledge. I think this is what most of us already know, right?
Exactly.
So, education is basically the process through which a human being transfers his knowledge to another human being. Isn't that so?
Yeah.
Yes, we do understand education in the very traditional and organized format. But education is not just the organized schools and colleges and institutions. They are just a systemized format for ensuring proper transmission of knowledge. Education is what we are doing right now, right? It's what is there on the chai tapris, on all the tea stalls, right? And all these conversations, all these interactions which involve transferring of information is essentially nothing but education, because it gives us more perspectives, more ideas, more skills or capabilities, which when we use, we enhance our inward as well as outward quality of life and the world around us, right? So education indeed is the fulcrum of us being humans, of us really being humans. And what really differentiates humans from every other species on the planet is education.
Okay. So, as Nakul, we have beautifully put it. This also is an educational session for me, though I've dropped out from college, but I get that confidence now that education doesn't stop in those boundaries.
Nope.
Definitely, and whatever we do every day, whatever interactions we have every day is should be looked from the viewpoint that it is some learning that we are getting. So that macro perspective is really what we should be looking education from.
Absolutely.
And also I've realized, or I've seen that how education is leading or could lead to solving most of the problems around us. So probably that also is an area where I could have your inputs, or how would you put that?
Certainly. So, Chirag, the human mind is very adept at identifying problems around us, right? And if you really wish to search for solutions for the problems, what you need to have is a lot of perspectives, a lot of open, explorative mindset towards those problems. Education basically endows us with a lot of ideas and perspectives which otherwise we might not have experienced in our life, and which we might never ever experience in our lives as well, because it is nothing other than the experiences of every individual coming together and being interchanged and exchanged, right? So whatever you've experienced in your life, you have a particular perspective about things from your own experience. Whatever I have experienced from my life, I have a huge bulk of perspectives owing to those experiences. But you certainly have some more perspectives than me in many cases, and I'll certainly have some more perspectives than you in many cases. So when there's a problem in the society which is untapped or which is not solved yet, it simply means that the people around who are trying to solve the problem are lacking in perspectives which through which they could come up to a solution, right? So education, as I said, is this sharing of all the information, experiences and perspectives. So when you share all those ideas, all those perspectives, all those experiences, then through this heap of perspectives, or you could technically call them data or information, whatever, you actually get ideas, what you call as innovative ideas, which turn into solutions, right? So education, the traditional way it happens, is nothing but sharing of perspectives, be it through novels, be it through books, be it through some lectures or sessions or whatnot. It is just the sharing of perspectives of people who've existed through ages and who've deep dived into those domains, those subjects, those areas, and explored that subjects with their work and with the people around them, and thus came to a conclusion that this is how these things happen, can happen, could happen, or should happen, right? And when we get an access to this perspective, we do not make the mistakes which we would have made otherwise and would have just been reinventing the wheel, right? So getting access to those perspectives actually grows and builds on our own perspective, and thus we are able to find a solution to any and every problem which is there. So thinking ideally, when it comes to solving a problem, is a group activity, and it should be a group activity, because when you think as a group and you discuss as a group, you get access to so many perspectives about the same situation and the pros and cons of every possible solution to that situation or that solution, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in order to conclude the solution, you need to think about it in yourself. So one needs to find perspectives, and one then needs to accumulate and conclude and structure those perspectives to come to a solution. Education is nothing but something which helps us to do that, isn't it so?
Exactly.
Sharing us the perspectives of all the people who have existed over centuries and who have added to that area of knowledge or that subject. So I certainly believe that education is the only means through which we could solve all the problems which human beings face or have faced or would be facing in future as well. And by this I do not just mean organized education, I mean the unorganized education as well, like all these YouTube videos, these quotes, these blogs, these Quora. Although it's very difficult to find the right information and right perspective through it, nonetheless it's beautiful. So I think it's the epicenter of us finding the solution to any and every problem in the world.
So I think having put that into that perspective, education so you've very beautifully drawn a comparison between knowledge and education. So knowledge is that ideas, and education is the process to share that knowledge and spread that. So
I would still draw another line.
yeah.
There's a difference between education, information and knowledge, right? And then again wisdom. So education is the process of sharing information, right? Information, when understood in a way that you could use it, becomes knowledge. Any information which you churn but you do not know how to use it, basically because you do not understand it, it's just information, it's not knowledge. So information which is when comprehended in a way that it could be used is knowledge. Knowledge, when you are aware about when and how to use it, is wisdom, right? So education, or the training of mind to education, gives us information, if we are really intelligent enough and really exploratory enough, we would make that information turn into knowledge for us,
Exactly.
right? But what would make us wise is our conscience. If we are conscious enough, right? The more conscious we are of our current situation and the circumstances around, the more we would know whether to use the particular knowledge at this place, this way, with this person or situation or not. You should not use every knowledge anywhere and everywhere,
Exactly.
because knowledge is nothing but information which you know how to use it. You should know when, where, and how to use the knowledge that you have,
Yeah.
which is wisdom.
Okay.
So the ultimate goal of any and every education on the planet is about making humans wiser.
Right.
It's about making humans thus more conscious.
Exactly.
Isn't that so?
Yeah. So coming to the point of consciousness, we've heard that values in education hold a very strong importance. But I mean, having been through that entire schooling process, and we've always felt that there was, I think, more emphasis given on information and sharing, but either we never focused on that from a perspective that when would we use it, or probably if it wasn't put in that way, that we never realized the importance of that information that is being shared to us. How will it be utilized, or how will it be? So where is the gap exactly here? Is it in the entire way that education industry is taking this concept forward, or is it from the individual student's point of view perspective? Where are we somewhere not able to take that take education to wisdom?
I feel the gap is in the way it is being education is being imparted. There isn't any gap from the student side. The structure, the system, I feel that is what is lacking. So when you talk about values in particular, values are something which can never be directly given or imparted. Like, we've all been taught that one shouldn't lie, that one should be honest, that one shouldn't grab something from someone which does not belong to him,
Yeah.
or one should not do any robbery or any small of theft. But tell me one person who has not spoken a lie, who does not, who hasn't ever cheated, or who hasn't ever stolen something. It could be something as small as a rubber and sharpener. It shouldn't be a bank robbery, right? And tell me one person who does not resort to all the things which were told as immoral to us. So the way things are given have always been improper. You could never tell a child to do this and not do that, because he will not accept it.
Exactly.
So the only way to impart morals or values is possible through stories, right? So if you remember, whatever stories we had in English and Hindi and such language oriented subjects, the stories were there for a reason, which I think no teacher ever understood, and obviously no student and parent as well.
Yeah.
Right? Every story was there and every poem was there to inculcate a certain moral, certain value, certain perspective into the mind of the student.
Yeah.
Right? But all we did was we talked about the story, and then we had to learn the story and the facts of the story and reproduce it, and you were considered as pass, that you have understood the moral of the story.
Yeah.
While what they should have done is should have given you a case study and tested you as to whether you make the right choice based on the moral that you've imbibed from the story, which the story intends to give you.
Yeah.
Isn't that so?
Yeah.
So we always pick up lessons from stories. The stories could be ours, the stories could be that of our friends, the stories could be, some just found in novels. And this is the way morals, values have always been transferred from one generation to another, from one civilization to another. If you look at the greatest epics of India, like Mahabharata and Ramayana and so many others, and also those of every other country in the world, they have always had stories. It would have been so simple to just write the values, the commandments that you should be honest, you should help others, you should do this, you should do that. But nobody would ever do that. So they created stories in the fabric of which they imbibed all these morals and values and showed you that, see, if you do not do things this way, then this is what could happen. And if you do them this way, then this is what could happen. Right? This made you absorb those values, absorb those morals, and live by them. Isn't that so? But today, as we talk about values in particular, our curriculum is having the right stories in the schools and all those places, but it talks nothing about what have you learned from the story, about how does it change the choices you would have made in a particular situation, of how does it make you a better and a more aware person. It talks nothing about it. All it talks about is learning, rectifying, and needlessly gobbling all things up and then vomiting it up. And hence the most intelligent ones, the so-called toppers, are the ones who are found to be most deceitful, most unpatriotic, non-patriotic, are the ones who would resort to any means to get success, who would do anything in the world to get their purpose suited. You do not find the toppers doing social work or charitable things way too often. There are always exceptions to everything. If these are the people who understood the stories the best, then they would have been the greatest moralists, the most value-oriented individuals in the world. But you don't find that. Isn't that so? So values could always and only be imparted and cultivated in human beings through stories. Stories told and shared in the right way and understood and experimented with as well. And now if you talk about how we could do that or how the system can actually do that, so I'll speak about how you can impart and teach any and every subject, not just these subjects concerning with your values, but also subjects concerning with your analytical capabilities, subjects concerning your scientific temperament, subjects concerning your creative mindset, right? Any and every subject which is there. Education actually should be a 6-step process, because see, it is all about cultivating the human mind. You are doing nothing but cultivating the human mind. The human mind is as raw as a piece of land. Education is the process of making it fertile, sowing the right seeds so that you can have the right fruits or flowers or veggies which could thus benefit everyone. If a fertile piece of land is not properly cultivated, it will only grow weeds which would harm everyone, including itself. Right? So education simply makes the mind or the land more fertile and puts in place the right seeds and plants for it to blossom and become fragrant and become amazing and more valuable for itself and for the world around as well. So how do you do that? How do you cultivate the mind? Cultivation of mind is basically a 6-step process, and thus education itself is a 6-step process. The current education system only has 2 steps out of it, and that too in no consecutive order, a very random order. And hence it's a big failure by all means, worldwide, not just in our country in India, worldwide it's a big failure.
I would agree to that.
Yeah, people have experimented with numerous models anywhere and everywhere, and they're still experimenting with them, and it's beautiful that they're experimenting, but without understanding the crux of it, any experiment is bound to fail.
Exactly.
Because it wouldn't never be complete and holistic in its approach, right? So what do these 6 steps constitute? The first step is observation. The second is exploration. I'm so sorry. The first step is observation. The second is questioning or curiosity, which arises out of observation. The third is exploration, which arises out of the curiosity which you have. The fourth is realization, right? The fifth is experimentation or implementation. And the sixth is storage or sharing or memorization, right? So Let me walk you through each of these steps. The first is observation. Until and unless you're observant about what is happening around, you could never ever be curious about it. You would never ever understand it. You would never ever have questions around it. You would never ever want to improvise or build on it. Right? A blind man will never look at the rainbow with wonder because he cannot see the rainbow.
Exactly.
Right? A deaf man would never appreciate and applaud music because he cannot comprehend music.
Yeah.
Right? So similarly, a man who is not observant of what is happening around is definitely bound to ignore what is happening around and does do nothing about it and nothing for it. Right?
Yeah.
So first step is observation. Second is curiosity or a questioning attitude. Observation is what makes us wonder. If you look at us as a child, every child is full of wonder. You look at a child's eye, he'd be continuously staring at everything and everyone around. Continuously staring.
Yeah.
You as grown-up adults do not stare because your sense of wonder has demolished perhaps.
Exactly.
Right? But every child in the world is continuously staring at everything because he's full of wonder. He is full of wonder because he's observational. So because you observe something, you cannot help but wonder about it.
Exactly.
That what is it? And why is it so? Right?
Yeah.
Now the moment you have these questions, what is it and why is it so, you are curious.
Curious.
And just look at a child is naturally curious. Right? You give him anything, he would like to eat it, he would like to bang it, he would like to smell it. So the child, out of his curiosity, tries to understand everything through all his senses. He would try to taste it, he would try to bang and hear its sound, he would try to smell it perhaps, he would try to touch it and grab hold of it. Right? What the child is doing is just to explore what the thing is from his curiosity. Right?
Yeah.
You tell a child that you give him a 10 rupees note and he would tear it.
Exactly.
And he would eat it. Right? He doesn't give a damn to the value you have for money.
Exactly.
He says, I want to know what this note is all about.
Yeah.
I'm so full of wonder.
Yeah.
You give him a new toy, a costly toy, a doll, he would still bang it, he would still eat it, he would still do everything about it.
Yeah.
You give him your footwear and he would still try to eat the footwear as well and bang it and smell it and do whatnot with it. And you show him burning fire somewhere and he would still go and put his hand into the fire and just try to experience it despite you telling him a strict no to do it. A child is observational, he's full of wonder, he's curious, and this makes him to explore.
Exactly.
And this is the nature of human beings, to observe, to be full of wonder and to explore. Right? So if you are not observational, you cannot be curious. If you are not curious, you cannot be explorative.
Exactly.
Right? And you being curious does not mean just testing things from your senses. It also means identifying the problems around. It also means identifying the laws and secrets behind the things that are happening around. Right? And thus, only when you ask questions, you start exploring the answers. Without a question, you would never ever search for an answer. No one would. And no one ever has. So once you explore the answer, there comes a point when you realize, when you understand that, oh, this is the answer. This is the reason things are this way. This is the reason this is happening this way. This is the answer to my question and my curiosity, that why and what is this thing all about?
Exactly.
Or how is it happening?
Yeah.
After you realize the answer, you try to experiment and to know whether your realization is actually correct or incorrect. Because you might have missed a particular aspect of it. Right? So you experiment with it. And if it stands to, you of course implement it.
Yeah.
So this is the stage where your information becomes knowledge. Are you getting?
Yeah.
Wherein after you have an answer or the realization, when you experiment it and know that it's true, it works this way, this is where the information becomes knowledge. And once you understand something through your experimentation and implementation, then you try to remember it, because sometimes you tend to forget it even after having done it. or you tend to store it so that you can share it with others, so that they need not go against the painful process of curiosity, exploration and experimentation and realization and then all these things, so that they don't reinvent the wheel.
Okay.
Like Thomas Alva Edison famously said that I have failed perhaps 10,000 times to discover the bulb.
But
And the journalist then asked him or told him that you should be ashamed that you failed so many times and now you're celebrating that you are victorious. And he said that you only know one way in which a bulb could be made. I know 10,000 ways in which it cannot be made. And you of course cannot go through the painful process of those 10,000 iterations to remake the bulb. Right? So the current system of education is not taking into context the 6-step process. What it is considering itself, which is only 2 steps out of it. The realization part, wherein the teacher comes and tells you this is what has happened, this is how it should happen. This is law of gravity. This is the war of Plassey, battle of Plassey. This is the Pythagoras theorem.
learn it.
And you don't give a shit to it. Why you don't? Because you're not curious about it.
Exactly.
You haven't observed it. You haven't explored it. So you don't give a shit to it. Right?
Yeah.
And then the teacher does not make you experiment and implement it. It simply asks you to learn it and reproduce it in the examination. So the current system only has a step of realization, which is again not your realization. It is a hammered and given realization. And the last step, which is memorization or retention and reproduction. Now just tell me, if you are not curious about something, will you ever be interested to understand it or explore it? No. If you do not have explored something, will you really understand it of why it is true and why it is not false? You would not. If you do not feel the need of something, and if you do not care about something, and if you're not interested in something, and if you have not explored something, and if you have not understood something, can you ever implement it? No, you cannot, right? So the entire education process right now is only centered around information. It is not about knowledge. Forget wisdom. It is not about knowledge. It's just information. And it's drowning the children with information, paying no heed to how it can turn it into knowledge, how it turn it into wisdom. Observational, more curious, more explorative, more experimental, and thus more implementable as well. You would always have so many such problems in the world, right? Because humans are made this way through the system. They are not born this way. And this is exactly the root cause of all the problems. That we are cutting down and killing the very quality of a human being to observe, to ask questions and to explore. What should be a very fertile land and have beautiful trees and plants sown into it is now a very barren land. And it was a very fertile land. We have turned it into a barren land. Well, we should have cultivated it into a more prosperous land.
Exactly.
Which is the human mind and the human being. And a human being who does not ask questions will always have terrible relationships, will always have terrible health, because he thinks about living a great life, but this is where and through which he lives life. He talks about self-respect, but he is so obese that he does not respect himself. All people who are obese are certainly not respecting themselves. They lack self-respect, right? He talks about changing the world, but never thinks about changing himself, right? So a human being which is not curious, not observant, will always make his life miserable and those around them miserable as well. Because he lacks perspective, he lacks clarity, he lacks sensibility. He's only full of foolishness and stupidity. He runs behind imaginary money, but not behind the end of money. The end means the use of money. Because money is just a means to an end. Right? He has no purpose. Money has become his purpose. And it would so, because he thinks that money is what is the most important thing in the world. It is not. Money is just the means to get some of the most important things in the world. Some, not all. Right? But because he never asks question, well, he starts doing that. A person who is not observant and who is not curious enough never questions his parents over the decisions and takes them to be right blindly.
Yeah.
And thus, sometimes the decisions make his life miserable. They ask him to marry a particular girl rather than the girl whom he wants to marry. And I'm not saying that they are wrong or he's right. I am saying to blindly believe anything is always wrong. And to not question anything can never be right.
Yeah.
He follows these priests, these religious propagators who have no experience of their own, who've just rectified something from someone else's belief as well, and who are propagating it to them, and based on their advice, their stupid ideas, their stupid orders, he kills himself, he kills people, and he destroys everything around. We all know that since the past centuries, the most number of wars have been fought on the name of religion. We all know that the amount of lives that have been lost because of religious violence could not be equated with any other form of violence. And religion, something which is meant to bring peace to you, which is meant to bring harmony to you, which is meant to bring prosperity and a better quality of life to you, how can it take away your very life? It is because of these people who do not observe, who do not ask questions, and who blindly believe those books to be the word of God.
Exactly.
They are not. And the beauty about words, or the sad part about words, is that they could be interpreted in so many different styles of fashions. So we always have so many interpretations. But they never question an interpretation. They blindly take whatever interpretation they get. And thus we have so many problems in the world. So many. Because they believe a particular book, a particular word written a particular years ago by a particular person in a particular frame of mind facing a particular situation is the word of God. No, it is not. And that too with their interpretation. It cannot be. And it hasn't ever been. So, whatever problems are there in the society, be it political, be it social, be it personal, be it religious, be it of any kind and every kind, environmental, right, are only because of this damaged system of education.
So I think life naturally has put that 6-step process, but
Yes.
we are creating an imbalance to break that and to remove that, and I think that is because if I look at it from another point of view, maybe like when a student is put through this education process, they are observing that okay, I have to pass through this exam, and then they are exploring, or they are curious about how to pass that exam, and then they are exploring ways to get those marks in the exam, and then they're probably realizing that okay, probably I could do this by cheating, or probably I could do this by ratifying, or because there's a specific set of questions answers. And I think then they somehow implement it, and once they've implemented, they've stored it and they're passing on that. So that process probably would be there, but it's going in a completely different direction.
Absolutely.
And I think that is what life has put in us naturally, but
so true.
We're creating that imbalance, or we're probably bringing the direction completely to the opposite way.
Yes.
So
because see, if you just look at it, the people who cheat in the examinations are one of the most creative children.
Exactly.
Because they are the ones who are asking a question of how I could just get this done without going through the tough process of it. They are one of the most smartest people.
Exactly.
And you do find them then later on going and doing smart things in their life. They might not be the most moralistic people. They might not be the most value based individuals. They might or they might not be. But they're certainly most entrepreneurial and creative individuals.
Exactly.
And those who are just rectifying are one of the most idiots. Because they are just doing the hard work without understanding why they're doing the hard work. and they are the ones who would run the system with absolutely no sense of why and how the system is being run for.
Yeah.
Right? So we do need people who are curious, who are creative, who are thus entrepreneurial, who are thus innovative. India has never ever received a Nobel Prize for innovation in medical sciences or in any other technological era.
Yeah.
We've received a Nobel Prize for poetry, for peace, but not for any invention. While Indians are in plenty in the world. It has one of the biggest population in the world. I think second or third biggest population in the world India has, right? While Indians are the ones who are running the biggest multinational across the world, right? But still India has no researchers, and it is because they have killed this curiosity mindset. You find these IITians going to investment banking. Well, what they should be going for is research, but hardly any of them are going to research. So you've learned engineering and now you're doing numbers, investment banking. You've bloody wasted someone's opportunity to learn engineering and thus do research whose work would have helped the country. And if you're just doing this engineering and then doing the number game, why did you do engineering? So these are people who are more focused on money than the use of money, than the need of money, than the impact of money, and hence they make money the purpose of life. Everyone around us has made money the purpose of life. Money can never ever be the purpose of life. Money is just a means to an end. Money just makes you capable of getting some of the most important things in life. Some of the most important things in life. Not everything. But people have made money the thing in their life. Over and above everything in their life. And thus they are having terrible and miserable and frustrated lives. Trust me, I talked to so many well-known entrepreneurs and very wealthy individuals, and they tell me that I do not know what I am doing with my life. I have achieved everything I dreamt of and perhaps more than that, and I am still miserable. Tell me, should I sell everything off? Should I just retort within and find the meaning and purpose of life? After having lived 2/3 of their life, they are having this question about what is life and what is the purpose of their life. And we call these people as successful, as our role models. No, they are not. So, a society which lacks curiosity lacks imagination. A society which lacks curiosity lacks consciousness. A society which lacks curiosity lacks morality. A society which lacks curiosity lacks progress and evolution. So we need an education which has all the 6 pillars in place. Only then we could create a great human, a great society, and a great civilization which is balanced and holistic by all means. Wherein people care about themselves, their mind, body, spirit, as well as that of the other human being, as well as that of the other tree or animal or species or planet. And we don't have to talk about this climate strikes and these resolutions and these laws and whatnot. They will never ever solve the problem to its entirety. So how do you do that? Right? The first step of education, which is about observation, you could do that by teaching children meditation. And what is meditation? It is nothing but the process of training your mind to be watchful of what is happening right now in the moment, rather than just wondering in what has happened sometime back or what could probably happen sometime in the future. It's about training the mind to just become watchful of what is happening in the moment, inside yourself as well as outside yourself. And there are several ways to meditate, active as well as passive. People only know about 2 or 3 ways, chanting something, and this is all they know. When you're doing, how are you observant? When you're doing, how are you becoming observant? After that, owing to some proper things, you become observant. But people think about meditation to be just this, which is so foolish.
Very true.
So meditation is one way wherein you can make, and perhaps the only way, but they have different processes to it, when you could make any and every individual observant. Now after observation, an individual naturally becomes curious. He asks question about what he's observing because he is full of wonder. Right? Like a child always is. But still, if you do not fill yourself with wonder, or if you do not ask questions, what the education should do is to make you understand the importance of asking questions. What teachers should do is to just ask question. They should sow the seeds of questions. They should never ever sow the seeds of answers. Teachers give answers. They should never give answers. They should only give questions. And then they should make a child explore. Because when you have questions, you cannot help but search for answers.
Yeah.
And children should be taught to be stubborn enough and patient enough to find answers. And not to compromise with second-hand answers given by someone else. And not to be restless enough to drop the question if they cannot find the answer. They should be stubborn and patient enough to search for the answer.
But if you look at it nowadays, everybody is so scared of making mistakes. So I think that is where they look for the easy way out. That someone would have found an answer and let's just adopt that, and they don't have that risk appetite again. So I feel that also how probably how can we address that as well in the same process?
It is all arising out of this very lack of this very process of trying to be observant and be curious about it. See, there is no harm in adopting someone's answer, but you do not have to adopt it blindly. It is actually foolish to reinvent every answer. I am not asking to reinvent every answer. It would be absolutely foolish to reinvent the wheel. But you should not blindly adopt it. I'm just telling you should have a skeptical mindset. And you should question it and investigate it. And only if it makes sense to you, experientially or logically, then should you adopt it. Isn't that so? So what a child should do in the process of exploration is to get himself abreast with a lot of answers, probable answers coming from within himself, from his own past experience, as well as from the answers coming from other individuals, these books, these videos, these classmates and people around him. And he should just investigate into each and every answer. That's the process of exploration, right? And the curious mindset would ensure that he would never ever accept anything at its face value. He would always be skeptical or curious about it, right? Once you investigate an answer or explore an answer, that is when you realize an answer. Because you only come to a realization after eliminating whatever you know is not the answer, right? You get to the truth by eliminating everything which is not the truth. There is no other path to truth apart from eliminating whatever is untruth. Isn't that so? So a child, when he explores, would eventually come to an answer. And the job of every teacher or educator is to only facilitate the process of coming to an answer. It is never to give the answer. A teacher should only ask questions. And if a child gives an answer, all she should do is not to reject the answer or to accept the answer, but just to question the answer. Once the teacher questions the answer, the child then thinks of it in a different perspective and either becomes doubly sure of it or goes deeper into it and thus more stronger at it, right? So a teacher, when she asks him the question about the answer, she facilitates his process of coming to an answer. Teacher fastens the process of coming to an answer. Otherwise the child will have to do all the investigation by himself, and he might not be able to do that sometimes, right? So teacher should stop teaching and start facilitating the learning or the exploring, right? Once the child now realizes the answer, all he needs to do is to implement and experiment the answer. So it's the duty of every educational institution to provide them the means to experiment and implement the answer. They could do it through case studies, through role plays, through some tools and techniques, and a lot of other things. Depends on the subject and the question, right? Only after experimentation are you really now capable of using the answer and claiming that you really know the answer. Right? Now this information has become knowledge in every child, every single child. If the child explores the answer and he tries to experiment and utilize the answer, now information has become knowledge. Without it, information can never ever become knowledge. People do not have knowledge, they just have information. Because they do not use any of the knowledge which they have, or hardly any knowledge that they have. Right? And now when you have the knowledge, right, then you simply need to store, share, transmit the knowledge, and to make yourself more aware. And awareness happens through observation. Okay? So this awareness and right mindset would make you conscious to know when to use the answer,
Yeah.
where to use the answer, and how to use the answer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
This would make you aware of it,
Yeah.
and thus make you wise.
Yeah.
So, an education system which has all these 6 processes:
Mm.
observation, curiosity, exploration, realization, experimentation and implementation, and retention or storage or memorization, is the only perfect process that there could be in the world.
Yeah.
Until you have all these 6 steps, you can never cultivate the human, you can never educate anyone, you can never solve any problem in the world, and you would always be fighting for all the problems in the world. You can never have a moralistic society, you can never have people of virtue, you could never have people performing at their best or at their highest potential, because they haven't even discovered their potential and they don't have the confidence or the skills required to live their potential. You could never have a human being which is actually functioning in the highest of his means. You would always have these idiots committing suicide and becoming depressed and committing all the crime in the world. You would always have them otherwise. But once you create this sort of system, you are putting almost a permanent end to some of the biggest problems which have plagued mankind since the beginning of civilization. And this is the way to do it. And
So-
this is the education.
So, I would say, going back to how education probably was before the British rule, that is considered as the Gurukul system of education, was this process that we are talking about, the 6-step process, was it a part of the education then? Because we've seen that a lot of places people have started talking more, I think, about how the education system is not doing any good to the children. They're moving back to a Gurukul kind of a system for education. There are schools that have come up which are having different curriculums. But is going back to those roots the answer, or is there something else that probably was missing even there and probably that we need to look at now?
See, if you look at the older system at its fundamental, it certainly had the essence of what I've been speaking. And how can I say so? Is purely from the references of stories like Mahabharata and Ramayana.
Exactly.
Right? We do not know how the system was because we haven't experienced the system ourselves.
Exactly.
All that we know about the systems is now through the stories that we carry as a part of the culture.
Yeah.
So we know that in the Mahabharata, when these Pandavas were being trained by Dronacharya, he trained them to look at the eye of the bird while shooting an arrow, right? So we know that he was training them to become more observational, right? He asked them a question, what do you see?
Yeah.
And someone says I can see the tree, someone says I can see the nest, someone says I can see the leaves, someone says I can see the sun and whatnot. And this guy says I can see the eye of the bird, and he says that is the right thing to see. So what he was doing there is making them more observant. Isn't that so?
Yeah.
Then if you again look at the same story of Mahabharata, and we find this Bhagavad Gita, and I'm not trying to endorse any religion by passing a comment through that context.
Yeah.
But you look at this story called of Gita in the Mahabharata war. You have this person who is Krishna and who is supposedly a god, and you have this person called Arjuna who is his nephew and or a brother or whatever, and his student as well. And this Krishna is sharing with him the secrets of life. And this guy is not blindly accepting his answer.
Yeah.
He's just poking him on with questions, with questions, with questions.
Exactly.
Now, if God appeared in front of you, would you just accept him blindly or would you ask him questions? Ideally, the way people are, they accept the priests and pandits and these idiots who haven't had any experience of their own, who are just ratifying and reproducing everything else like an idiot student, or dumb student. They are accepting their interpretation blindly. All these gurus and whatnot. And I'm not saying they all are bad.
Yeah.
But yes, we know how the society is nowadays.
You've seen that, yeah.
But this guy, having God in front of him, and a trustworthy God because he was his, relative as well, he's still questioning him. He's still curious. Where does this curiosity come from? The same education. Isn't that so?
Exactly.
And then you have these people who you see that they come to an answer, they discover an answer, or they implement an answer. You have the story of Eklavya in the same Mahabharata. This guy who's not even being taught by the Guru, but who's observing the Guru teaching his disciples whatever he's teaching. And out of his observation and curiosity and exploration, he becomes a better archer than the student Arjuna himself. Because this was the process of education, right? He became knowledgeable without a teacher because he was going through this process. Isn't it so? So I surely feel that in so many ways the Gurukul system was based on these tenets of understanding the human mind and cultivating the human mind and giving him a wide spectrum of exploration and training him in what then is the best science for his capability. Right? They were all trained in different disciplines based on their capability and interests, of course, which is not there currently, right? So certainly the Gurukul system, I think, was based on these tenets. But we should not simply go back to ashrams and all those places and talk about the Vedas and just the Upanishads. They are not futile books, but they are not complete books in itself. We need to talk about technology. We need to talk about modern management sciences. We need to talk about so many progress which human beings have done in all these thousands of years after the Gurukul period. It also needs to be a part of the education, and it also needs to be utilized to impart education. Technology could be a wonderful mean to impart education, and it's being used in so many ways. Earlier Gurukul system had no technology. So if you simply talk about going back to it, you would say no technology. Don't use technology. Wear these clothes, remain in the jungles and whatnot. No, that isn't the answer. And that isn't holistic or evolutionary even. And even practical so. So you do need the fundamental tenets of it, coupled with the progress and the knowledge of whatever we've gathered in all these years, and the needs of the future as well.
Exactly.
Looking at where we're going towards. You cannot just teach them the Vedas. You have to teach them what Einstein discovered and what Newton said and what other amazing people have done as well. Right? And only when you have the system where the fundamentals are kept intact, but the process imbibes in it the modern needs and capabilities, can we really have a beautiful and amazing educational model for mankind and the world.
Which is more relevant to
our times and to the future needs as well.
Exactly. So talking about the future, how or what can we do with technology or with new methods of education, or like the Western countries have been adopting Montessori methods, wherein they're making students go through that entire process of where there are no books, or probably like how Finland has adopted education where there are no exams in the first place. So what probably according to you would be the ideal way to go forward? There are concepts like homeschooling as well coming up. So what should we look at, or how can we take that first step towards bringing it back or bringing it to the correct direction?
See, we have a lot of new things coming up which are a counter effect to the current system. But I wouldn't say that all of them are holistic. If you talk about the systems of Finland or Denmark, they cannot be as it is replicated or copied to other geographies as well.
Exactly.
Because education is also suited to meet the needs of a particular situation in the society. The needs of Indian society is difficult from that of a Sri Lankan society, from an American society, Australian, British, Swedish, European. Every society is in a different phase of evolution, and it has its own different needs. Right? So we can never ever copy paste the methods and processes being adopted elsewhere, which foolishly a lot of countries are doing, and even India has done in many ways. But certainly that is not the way. We need to take inspiration from those ways. We need to take ideas certainly from those ways, and keeping in mind the outcomes of it. But we need to see if they are really relevant in the Indian context, or in whichever country's context are we trying to apply it or not. Right? And thereafter, we need to use technology in order to elevate the quality and the experience of education. Right? Education has to be experiential. Because see, what we value is knowledge, but what we run behind is experience. Right? What we value is knowledge, reasons and logics and whatnot. But what we run behind is experience. You tell a smoker with that smoking cigarette is harmful for his health. He could get cancer, he could die. And you have 80% of the packet of the cigarette covered with photograph and this warning that cigarette smoking is injurious to your health. And you have doctors smoking cigarettes. You have literates smoking cigarettes. You have all the professionals and IT guys smoking cigarettes. Why? Do they don't understand the warning? They do. But what a human being values is not the reason, not the logic, but the experience. And this is exactly what technology can enable us to do. Right? It could enable us to enhance the experience of education, to make it more fun, more experiential, more amazing in so many ways. Right? You could enhance the quality of education through technology, because teachers and facilitation is a big question, and until we have good quality teachers, we can never have good quality students. Right? So technology can definitely fill up that gap of quality control or standards. So what technology could do is up level the quality element of the current education. It could bring teachers at par with students, because technology can create those quality standards through which you can measure as well as implement those things. So if you see that what we run behind is an experience but not the reason behind it. People smoke because they enjoy the process of smoking. It makes them feel good, although they are very well aware that it destroys their life in so many ways. Right? You choose a movie over your studies because you know that you will enjoy the movie but you won't enjoy the study. But what would really matter to your life is the study and not the movie. Right? So every child as well enjoys the experience aspect of it. This is how human beings have been genetically made. This is how we've been coded. This is how we've been manufactured to value experiences more than logics and reasons. Right? So education, which currently comprises mostly about logics and reasons, has to be made experiential for them to actually absorb these logics and reasons and thus to use these logics and reasons. Right? And technology can be a great enabler to help these individuals to experience and thus enhance their interest into the process of education. So you could use these virtual reality headsets and these screens and the speakers to create that experiential audio visual effect for someone to really get into the cusp of thing. They could really observe a lot of processes in three-dimensional perspective rather than just a blackboard drawing of it, and thus enhance their experience of it and their interest in it, and thus their curiosity and exploratory spirit about it. Right? So one thing which we could do is bringing all these virtual thing into the education process. People nowadays are very much against technology. They're only idiots. You cannot avoid technology. And technology is indeed a great enabler if used wisely and not idiotically. Right? So virtual reality could be a great boon. We should have virtual reality things in schools, in colleges, to make them experience and explore a lot of processes which cannot be otherwise demonstrated so easily in the classroom setting. Right? So you could decrease that cost barrier and that distance barrier with technology. Another thing which you could do is increase the attentive part of the student. You could also measure through technology about the state of mind of a student through several biomarkers. Right? Your breath is one biomarker, the blood oxygenation level is one biomarker, your pulse is a biomarker, and so are several other things. So if you have small rings, small gadgets, small wearables through which you could really gauge the state of attention and awareness or an individual, you could really know that this guy needs more help, and thus first help him to come to a state of ease within himself. Because if you're not at ease within yourself, you cannot accept and explore whatever is there outside yourself. Right? The current education does nothing about it. And the only way to acknowledge, to measure and to do something about it is through technology. So using these wearables, these gadgets and all these things, you could really understand that what is the state of mind and health a student is in. And until he's in optimum health, of course, he cannot be in optimum state of mind and thus do and accept what is being given to him. Another thing which technology could do is to create more sincere and focused ecosystem or environment wherein the teachers and the students are functioning. Because the teachers too need to be very serious and sincere about their work. Technology can help us to measure, can help us to improvise that, can help us to really implement that they work sincerely in the right way by the right means. It could be cameras, it could be analytical tools, it could be attendance, simple attendance things through which we know if a teacher is really punctual, if a teacher is really using his pitch of sound and voice modulation in a way wherein the children are able to understand and enjoy his process of teaching. If a teacher is speaking in a flat tone, students are bound to sleep. A teacher has to understand the tenets of voice modulation, of tonation, of body language, and of so many other things, which most of the teachers today do not. And there is no quality control mechanism for that. Technology can help us to have quality human teachers. Technology could be a great measurement tool for the output of students as well. So it could be one of the easiest ways to measure what a student has done. Like you said that some countries have done away with examination, there are no bags and all those things. See, examination is just a mode of testing whether a student has understood what you wanted him to understand. And seriously, the current way of examination of a question and answer pattern, which just tests your memorization capability and not your comprehension, curiosity, intelligence and creativity, is a big fail, is a big no, is a big disaster. What we need is ways to evaluate a student in a different experiential approach, and technology can certainly help us to do that, which teachers would not be able to do that so perfectly. So what I'm talking about is a teacher and a teacher and a technology integrated framework. You cannot do away with the human being, but you cannot even ignore the capability of technology. Isn't that so? So everything which concerns with the experience, sincerity and quality of education could be enhanced and upgraded through technology seamlessly. And we need to do it. There hasn't been a better time to create a higher human being which is using his potential in the best way possible than today, with all our outward technological progress and the inward knowledge which some of us still have, right? And which is freely now available owing to Google and whatnot, the technological framework, the internet. So these devices, these softwares, these aids, these wearables, all these things can in a great way enhance the experience, the quality and the process of education. So it shouldn't be just the Gurukul system, it should be the modern Guru cool system.
That's a fantastic way of putting it. However, one concern that also comes with technology is again how people understand it would impact education. Maybe some people would understand that bringing technology into education would mean replacing teachers with robots or videos or something, but that again would mean a very standardized communication to every child, and as we all know that every child is different, they all need some custom learning. So
absolutely,
I think you've very wonderfully drawn that line that technology can play a very important role in selecting quality human teachers so that human touch is there, and at the same time it makes the entire process
the
fit
entire
into
experience
place.
Amazing, enhance it.
So going forward, again there is this question that there's a way to, so there's the fundamental setup that has to be changed. There's a way that we can change it using technology, using the better parts of each systems. But the question comes as to who or what kind of an intent would make this entire process come in, because a lot of places we see major problems in that standardized, or the current educational system is again commercialization. So a lot of people are creating educational institutions from a commercial point of view. So that is where that fiasco has happened. Or so is it the industry that has to bring in this change, or is it the government who has to bring in this change, or is it any and everybody amongst us, or who has to bring it for our children? So how can this be executed, and how can this be given shape, and who would be the appropriate person?
See, change is always brought by people who want and who wish to bring a change.
Yeah.
So whosoever understands the importance and need of it should work towards it. If policies and structures come from the government, nothing can be better than it, because then it becomes a standard minimum requirement for everyone to follow.
Yeah.
So bringing policy changes, bringing the necessary investment and the necessary infrastructure for it should come from the government, and it would greatly be a boon for the entire land and the entire nation of any country be it, right? But if the government isn't willing for it, if the government doesn't seem to give priority to it, which it should, this is something which it should give the highest priority over and above everything else, which sadly it isn't giving, right? If the government isn't giving, then certainly the private entities should give. See, I am not against commercialization of education. I am just for a great quality of education. So if someone can offer a greater quality of education than the government system, what's the harm? At the end of the day, we just want better human beings. And if something can create a higher human being than the current process, what's the harm in it? You have people who are willing to give resources for it, and you have people who are willing to take resources to be able to do it. I don't find any harm in it. But yes, we certainly cannot do it with the government system of it. We need that social system so as to be able to cater those who cannot afford it as well. Because with pure commercialization or capitalization, what also comes is unaffordability for a lot of classes. And with a country like India and many other nations of the world, you cannot afford to do that, where the minimum wages are so low and the economic condition is so miserable, right? So certainly there has to be some initiatives from the government as well as from private players. Whosoever can work more on it, can enable it in a better way through investing the needed resources for it, should do it, right? Because money is just going to flow from here and there, even if it is commercial. What matters to me is amazing human beings, is people who have a heart for the civilization, for mankind, for life, who wish to do something for the world, and who understand that their life that they have is for the world, and not the other way around, that the world is for themselves, right? People who are creatives, who are inventives, who are innovatives, who are entrepreneurial, who are working with a great potential in any domain that they are working on. We need humans who can uplift other humans. And whatever process can enable that to happen, I am for it. Right? So, government intervention coupled with private willingness and participation, I think would be a great way to bring this into fruition.
This was a very fantastic and fruitful discussion I think we had today. And though there's so much to talk about it, and though there's so much to speak and so much to deep dive into, I think we never be over what better could the entire scenario be. And probably this could start some more interaction, some more information sharing, and some more knowledge sharing at various places. And I think this was a really fruitful discussion.
I'm glad you find it so. I hope everyone finds it so.
Yeah.
Thank you. And do share.
Like, share, subscribe, अलग से bit.